Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm so very excited to welcome Whitney Anne Adams to the podcast today for this special bonus episode celebrating the 20th anniversary of Moulin Rouge, which came out 20 years ago today, June 1st, 2001. How are we doing, Whitney?
Oh, so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I have heard that you might like this movie a little bit. Is that correct?
It is kind of my favorite movie. I've seen it over 300 times.
You have seen Moulin Rouge over 300 times in full?
Yes, I sure have.
Man, I have a few favorites that I've seen many times. I don't know if I have watched one movie more than 50 or 60 times. That's amazing.
It's a pretty intense amount. I mean, no other film comes close. But it was not the one I saw the most in theaters, I have to say.
The ending of this movie, you're able to watch that 300 times. It's so sad.
It's so sad, but somehow cathartic in a way where it's just like I cry out all my emotions.
Yeah. So we'll get to the movie in a minute. I wanted to ask you about your career as a costume designer. Whitney did costume. You were the costume designer for some really great films of recent, including Freaky, which I just watched the first time a few weeks ago and was just floored by. I thought it was so much fun. If you could talk a little bit about your costume designer career and kind of how you got involved with that.
Oh, definitely. It's funny because I was pre-med in college for about 3 weeks and then switched over to the theater, realized that, I took one fun class, intro to theater design, and that was kind of it. And then I, hit the ground running from there, moved to New York to do Broadway, I was a Broadway tailor for quite a few years, made Broadway costumes. And then I, through happenstance, met Baz Luhrmann and Catherine Martin, and I worked for them for 8 years. And my first movie I ever worked on was The Great Gatsby, which, pretty insane. And then I've been doing movies ever since.
Can you talk a little bit about working on The Great Gatsby? What was that all about?
That was one of the most insane experiences of my life. And it was pretty much a year of my life.
Wow.
Especially being my first movie and I had a really solid theater background, so I knew a lot, but there was so much I didn't know. But it was pretty intense every day. I mean, I was working 14 to 18 to 20-hour days sometimes, and there was
20-hour days.
I slept at the office a few times, but again, Moulin Rouge being my favorite movie and Baz and CM being people who are so influential in my life, it was my first job with them, so I wanted to prove myself and work as hard as I possibly could. And I'm super proud of the work that we did on it, but it was really intense.
I want to say that film came out in May of 2013. So would you have worked on that in 2011, 2012? Is that the time frame?
I started 2010 is when we did the first sort of workshop. We had Leo and Toby, and we did, a couple scenes in Upper East Side Mansion to get the movie greenlit. And then we started in full force. We had 9 months of pre-production. And then we filmed in Australia. So it was nice to live in Australia for a bit and get to make a giant movie on the Fox Studios lot where Moulin Rouge was filmed. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I loved that film. And that was a great year for DiCaprio. He had just done Django Unchained, and then he did Great Gatsby, and then Wolf of Wall Street all came out
right after.
Within 1 year.
Yes, he went to Wolf of Wall Street right after.
So I'm wondering if he did. I wonder if he shot Great Gatsby first before Django, or okay. So that was the first one he did.
I know it might have been in the middle. I think it was. I can't remember though.
And so after The Great Gatsby, what were your first jobs as a costume designer for films after that?
My first costume design, I got through this amazing man, Skylar Weiss. He was Baz's assistant on Australia, and then now he's sort of Baz Mark's general manager. But he was producing this movie called The Eyes of My Mother, tiny indie film. I think we made it for $250,000, but it was just the most fun of my life. And that was my first design. He gave me a chance, and then everyone on that movie gave me a chance, our brilliant director, Nick Pesh. And we just had the most fun in the woods in the middle of nowhere. I think my entire costume budget was $3,000. So going from The Great Gatsby, where we had, millions of dollars, to then 3,000, I've sort of worked in both bookends of budgets.
Yeah. And then you have some great credits already. You have Irreplaceable You, which is a beautiful Netflix movie I watched. I remember. Was that a couple years ago?
Yeah, it came out, I think, 2017. It's so beautiful. I really had fun with that one. That was a really fun one.
and then Happy Death Day to You
Yes.
with the number 2.
Yes.
Both of those films, I believe there's a third one on the way. Is that true
We
or no?
hope. I mean,
We
we're
hope.
crossing our fingers. We all want to make it. It's just whether they'll let us.
Okay.
We all want to do it.
Yeah, because those were blasts. And you've been working with the director Christopher Landon. You worked with him again on Freaky, which came out at the end of 2020. So take me through this. Were you finished shooting before COVID, or were you
Yes,
still filming?
we finished
Okay,
December 2019.
gotcha.
So we like just finished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to your job as a costume designer with a film like Freaky, how do you approach a movie like that? I mean, because it's so much about the costumes, like how the lead female changes in her demeanor, becoming Vince Vaughn, and like
exactly.
So that must have been a blast to figure out, like, okay, what am I going to put? What clothes am I going to put her in just to make her look like she's changed into this other person?
Exactly. And there's so many factors that go into it. I mean, for me too, it's like, where do these clothes come from? They can't just appear out of nowhere. I'm very much a designer who likes to tell the story of where did these clothes come from? And so Millie's sister Shar is a police officer, and we thought, oh, on the weekends she likes to go clubbing and let off some steam because, you know, home life is so tough with the loss of her father and her mom's alcoholism. So we had all these, like, you know, club outfits for Shar in the closet. And, you know, the butcher's in Millie's body, he's going through Millie's closet, he hates everything. It's all like grandma dresses and all, you know, vintage sweaters. And then he goes into Shar's room and sees this leather jacket, and that was sort of the basis for everything, because in the original script it was a dress, and both Chris and I knew from get-go, we're like, that's not going to work. We have so many stunts, we have so many things happening, we got to do padding on our stunt double. I'm also very stunt person oriented. I want to make sure that they're as safe as possible. So if I can incorporate more layers into the costume, I try to. So just thinking about, okay, what's the perfect thing that incorporates all of this? And it ended up being that costume, but it took so much effort to get there. I think Catherine and I had 4 fittings before we really nailed that jacket and like those pants. And we wanted to feel kind of androgynous, especially with the wide leg pants. It feels masculine and powerful, but also very feminine. It sort of walks this line in a way that works perfectly for the butcher.
Yeah, I just thought it was a total blast of a movie, and it's fun. It's fun, like, you know, I love horror films. The ones that match horror with comedy and do it well are really tricky, and that's something I think Christopher Landon does very well.
He's like the king of that. He's so brilliant. And every time I read his scripts, I'm just dying laughing. They're scary, they're funny, they're heartfelt, they're everything. That's why I follow him everywhere. I mean, I'm about to go do my 4th movie with him, and you know, we just have the most fun.
That's fantastic. That must be a lot of fun to have a director who wants to keep the same crew members on movie after movie, right?
Yes, exactly. You know, creating that family atmosphere. And, you know, everyone wants to do it for Chris because he's the best.
Now, I know you can't say much about it, but there is another film coming soon. Can you say anything?
Right. I can say, so I just finished Paranormal Activity 7 that Chris wrote. I cannot say anything else, but I will say that it was such a blast and no one is expecting what we're going to give them.
I'm a huge fan of that series, Paranormal Activity, and I'm so excited there's another one coming, that you've worked on it and that Christopher Landon is involved.
Yeah.
I'm really, you don't have to say anything else. I'm excited, and I'm sure our listeners will be too. So that takes us to Moulin Rouge. So I'd love for you to tell the story you shared on Instagram recently about why this movie means so much to you. Like, when did you first see it, and how did it come to be your favorite movie?
So I didn't see it in theaters. I think, you know, I had just turned 16. I was sort of at that age that, oh, you could maybe go see it, maybe not. I was a tomboy. I was into basketball. Like, movies were a huge part of my life, but I was all about Jurassic Park and Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Because I have 2 brothers. And then I remember I was at the drugstore with my best friend and we were just looking at what movie to get. And I just remember seeing that bright color cover of the DVD case. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I remember hearing about this. We should go watch it. This is like the fall of 2001. So it probably just hit, you know, rental. We took it home and we watched it, and I was just so stunned. I you know, of course, ended the movie sobbing like a baby. Completely crying.
No.
Yeah. Like, completely enraptured by this incredible story of all of these big ideas and, you know, truth, beauty, freedom, love, all these very hard, you know, baselines in our lives. And it just sort of blew me away. and long story short, a few months later, I got really sick. I have 2 blood disorders that I was born with, and my body was working overtime and just couldn't do it anymore. And so I got really sick. I was hospitalized for a while. And then I had to wait 5 months for my surgery. And I just kept getting weaker and weaker. I couldn't eat fat too. So I was like losing all this weight. I was down to, I think, 75 pounds by the time I got my surgery. I was just barely, a human. And I was just so concerned about, like, am I going to die? I wanted to sort of get out of my brain. And I just attached to Moulin Rouge, and I watched it every single day that I was home or in the hospital. I was just, this is the thing that is my escape from my current reality that is so dark. And then getting to have that be my touchstone and my escape was so important to my mental survival. So getting through that time was such a testament to that movie.
So what do you think it is about Moulin Rouge that made it such a great escape for you?
I think it's the mixture of just the depth of the world, the costume design, the production design, the heightened reality with the musical numbers and all of this stuff that would never happen in real life. This true love, this the way that the story goes, it's sort of based on like a fairy tale. It's a mixture of La Boheme and all these different influences, but it's bigger than life. And I think for me, escaping from my life that felt very small and scary and running to this world that's big and huge and welcoming and lush, it was just such a different thing from what I was experiencing. So it was the exact opposite of my life.
Had you been familiar at the time with anyone's work? Like, had you seen Romeo and Juliet or Strictly Ballroom? Had you seen any films with Nicole Kidman or Ewan McGregor before?
I had seen I had seen Romeo and Juliet and I loved it, but I hadn't connected that was Baz and CM.
Got it.
I had seen it, but I loved it, but I had not connected that to their work. I had seen Nicole Kidman and I think a couple things before. I'd never seen Ewan McGregor in anything, and of course I became full-blown obsessed with him. Like so much so that I was like buying stuff on eBay, like autographed photos and like the whole thing. I think I owned every single one of his DVDs by the time I graduated from high school. Like full-blown obsessed, as a teenager is wont to be.
Yeah, all my guy friends at the time were obsessed with Star Wars, right? And he's in Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And I'm that outlier over here. Like, I like him more in Moulin Rouge.
Moulin Rouge. And my whole family's a big Star Wars family. And so we, of course, like, oh, it's Obi-Wan. And that came out, I think, right after Moulin Rouge or around the same time. And I just remember seeing him in Moulin Rouge first and then being like, oh, he's also in Star Wars. And that just sort of, continued my love for him.
Yeah. This film was also really important, I think, for Nicole Kidman's career too. She had done a lot of great work in the 80s and 90s, but I feel like this one really catapulted her to a new level, especially with the Oscar nomination. She got nominated for Best Actress. Yeah. Before this, she was in a lot more supporting roles, right? I mean, really the only big lead of a movie where she got some awards recognition was To Die For in 1995, which is a great movie.
Such a good movie. She's so good in that movie.
But this was a big one.
A big one for her. And she does so much. And she also puts so much of herself into it. I mean, she broke ribs. She got hurt. Much happened to her on this. Yeah, she got really hurt. But she pushed through. And I mean, her work is incredible. Absolutely.
Her injury, it might have been 2 injuries or like on this film.
I think it was twice. Yeah.
It prevented her from doing Panic Room with David Fincher. She was hurt, and so they had to bring in Jodie Foster at the last minute. So she didn't get to do Panic Room. Right. I don't know when she shot the others. That came out in August of 2001. I'm assuming that was done after this because they shot Moulin Rouge at the end of 99. So it took a while for the movie to finally come out in June of 2001.
I think she shot the others after Moulin Rouge.
I don't think there were as many stunts in the others, right?
No, not
she's just
much.
Standing a lot.
It's a lot of like foreboding and walking through rooms and looking at, is there a ghost there?
I don't know if you looked. I looked up last night a couple actors who got close to these roles. Did you know Heath Ledger got really close?
So different. The like super young Christian would have been really interesting.
Yeah, I think the reason he wasn't chosen, I think Lerman could recognize his talent was just he's a little young in 99 it would have been.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I guess
such a different movie.
Like, I mean, I can kind of see it. I mean, he looks fairly old, like older, and like The Patriot,
Yes,
which came out in 2000. I think it
yes,
could have worked. I don't. Did he ever sing in a movie? Well, he sang in 10 Things I Hate About You.
right,
But
right.
like
He's
did
singing
he ever?
that.
Was he ever in a musical? Heath
I
Ledger?
don't
I
know.
don't think he
I
was.
don't think he was.
So that
I
would have
don't
been
think he was.
interesting.
Hmm. And I think,
Casting is so crucial,
it is. And Ewan McGregor's sung in so many of his movies, and so it felt like a natural transition for him. But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know what it was that sealed the deal with him, but I think that would have been an interesting, other universe to see that
Yeah.
version of Moulin Rouge.
And then I guess Courtney Love was
Yes,
considered, if not heavily considered, for the Nicole Kidman role.
I remember
That
reading
would
that.
have been a different
Really
movie.
interesting. Very different movie.
Because
Very
it
different
seems kind of odd now, but when you think about it, back in '96, she was such a powerhouse in The People versus Larry Flint.
Yes.
And then she was in Man on the Moon, which came out in '99 with Jim Carrey. So it would have made sense for her in '98, '99 for them to be considering her for a role like this where they're singing. But boy, that would have been a different
Very different
movie,
vibe. Very different movie.
you know?
Which is why casting is so fascinating, and
Yeah.
it's such an integral process. And me too, as a costume designer, working with who that person is, there's only so far you can go with the person
Mhm.
and their body type and their selves. Of course, there's so many costumes that disguise people, but when you're doing a costume, it sort of has to be believable, and you got to use so much of who they are as a basis or as a foundation for their
Yeah,
look.
absolutely. I'm thinking like on Freaky, you have someone like Vince Vaughn, who's so
Yes,
well known, and
yes.
he's playing a little bit against type, right? And so you have to figure out, okay, what kind of costume do I put Vince Vaughn in this movie to make the
Right.
audience really go with this kind of a character?
Like that he's the serial killer. And then we also, storyline wise, like where does the butcher get his clothes? He like lives in this like, weird broken down warehouse / sometimes in the woods. He probably, kills a blue collar workman on occasion to steal his clothes and then wears them until they fall apart. And so that's sort of what we were thinking of. And so I had all these very specific references of like 1970s coal miner and then, a modern truck driver. And like that's how he got his final outfit. But yeah, it was very interesting to figure out, okay, what makes sense and also makes him look not like Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn was a pretty big star circa '99. Maybe he could have played the
Yes.
Ewan McGregor.
Yeah,
That would have been
Can
a
you
very different
imagine?
movie.
Yes, very different.
Hey, I mean, the guy does drama and comedy. You never know.
I mean,
maybe he'll
he's
do a
very
musical.
he's very talented, and he was very fun to watch work. I mean, he was so good, and he's so funny and freaky.
Yeah. I mean, he did play Norman Bates a while back, so he does have that side of him, right?
He sure does. Yes.
So was watching Moulin Rouge, was that the first kind of instigator of like, hey, maybe costume design in film is something I might be interested in later on? Was this the first movie that you
I didn't
thought
know
that?
it at the time, but just being, watching that world and seeing these beautiful costumes and being aware of costumes as a thing, that was sort of the first big aha moment for me. And then a couple of years later, when I decided to get a theater degree instead, I was pre-med for 2 weeks, and I was like, no,
2 weeks.
can't do that. And then all of my friends who had just met me, college had just started, they're like, are you insane? Do theater. We know you well enough already that you got to do theater. And so it stuck. But I think it was all of those factors and remembering how much I love this movie. I mean, I brought my Moulin Rouge can dancer costume with me to college.
So what was it like to meet Baz Luhrmann for the first time? Were your just eyes like big, like, oh, like were you able to say anything?
I was super nervous. I was more nervous to meet CM because CM, Catherine Martin, her work is so brilliant.
Yeah.
And especially being a costume designer, wanting to be a costume designer when I first met her, I mean that she's it for me. And long story short, I won a costume design contest as part of the movie Australia, and that's how I got to meet them.
His previous film.
Yeah,
Before
Australia,
Gatsby.
Exactly. It's a big one for me because they had all these they had a podcast series where they did all these 10-minute behind the scenes videos, and they had contests attached to each one of them. And on the costume design one, you had to design a costume for Nicole Kidman's character when she arrives in Australia. So I entered the contest. I ended up winning the whole thing. I won a trip to Australia. I emailed Catherine's website being like, hey, I won your contest. Thank you so much for having it. Like, I love your work. I'm excited to go to Australia. And her assistant wrote me back and said, oh, Catherine and Baz aren't going to be here, but do you want to come by their house and we'll have tea in their garden? I was like, yes.
That's where you
So
say yes.
yes, I was like, yes, please. And so I had a lovely afternoon tea with the wonderful Savannah, who was their assistant for a very long time, and their design assistant. And then, came back to New York. Year and a half passes. I see that Baz is going to be the chairperson of the New York Musical Theater Festival in New York. So I bought a ticket to the gala, and I emailed the assistant, emailed Savannah being like, hey, I happen to be going to the same gala that they're going to. Can I meet them? She's like, sure, we'll set something up. And then an hour later, she emails me back asking what I'm up to these days. And then a few hours later, their head producer calls me from Australia being like, can you work for us for 3 weeks? And can you interview with Catherine tomorrow? So then I met Catherine the very next day. I remember getting the phone call like on 43rd Street and 8th Avenue, just pacing like a lunatic on this phone call. Like, am I really going to meet Catherine Martin tomorrow? And and then I met her. They just moved to New York. It sort of was perfect timing. And then I worked with them for 3 weeks on the first Gatsby workshop, and then ended up working for them on and off for 8 years. So it was just, a little surreal. And then getting to tell them how much the movie Moulin Rouge meant to me. Of course, I waited a bit till I was, they knew me better and I had, proven myself a bit more, but just telling them how much that movie meant to the 16-year-old broken person that I was.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, just this story itself you're telling me is a movie. Like, so, like,
yeah, it's
how many
crazy.
how many people in their teens fall in love with a film like you did, and then go on to work for the people who were kind of in charge of the production? That's crazy.
Insane. I mean, I still can't believe it. And I won a contest.
Yeah.
And then it's just the craziest story. And I'm still so thankful. I mean, I have a career because of them. I'm so thankful that they took a chance on me, someone who'd never worked on a movie. They knew that I had drive and that I wanted to learn and that I worked hard, and they did so much to help me. And I'm forever grateful for that.
It's so fascinating. So let's talk about Moulin Rouge and kind of what we love about it. What are some other things about the movie? Anything specifically? You can talk about the costume design, of course. Just any scenes, any songs that you really love, like more than others?
I think for me, like the pinnacle for me, at least as a kid, as a teenager, was Elephant Love Medley. Like that was it. That was the thing.
It's spectacular.
It's the best. I mean, but pulling all these amazing different song lyrics and putting them together in this crazy way that probably seemed insane to people, and they made it work. The brilliant Anton Monstead, who was the music supervisor, who's now a dear friend of mine. I love him so much. But him and Baz created this amazing soundtrack that I think on paper looked crazy, and they totally made it work, and in such an incredible way. And so I think it was new, it was innovative. It was something I'd never seen before. And that was really cool.
Elephant Love Medley is my favorite scene. I'm sure it's the favorites for. I've been just watching it again last night. It'd been a while, and I was like, "Oh, that's right. This is fantastic." And it's not just the song; it's like the visuals and how they use the camera, and the performances really come through. The emotion of both characters and their singing voices are just so astonishing. Like it just works. And that song, I just remember when I first watched it, I'm like, wait. I recognize these songs, but they're all in one song. How do they do that?
It's like how they piece it together. And then also what I love too is that Lady Marmalade's in the movie for 2 like lyrics, and that's it. And they took this huge hit song from the movie and they put it in a very small place because they knew that that's where it needed to be. And they were just so, confident about what they put together, rightly so. I mean, and my other favorite, I think, is Roxanne. I just adore that, the way that was put together, the dancing and the orchestrations. It was just really a powerful moment that the story needed.
Yeah, especially with Ewan McGregor singing as he's walking out of the building. Yes. Like it's like gives me chills just thinking about it.
Like, rage singing, like screaming almost. It's just so powerful.
Yeah. I also forgot how funny the movie is. Like I was watching it, I'm like, oh, that's right. It's kind of funny too. I remember it being I always think about Elephant Love Medley, serious romance. She dies at the end. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, it's been out for 20 years. She dies. Yeah. But it's not like it comes out of nowhere, right? I mean, I watching it again last time, I'm like, oh, they really set that up. Like she is she's falling and she's sick almost from the beginning that we meet her. So it's not like it comes out of left field, but
Right. It's like in the beginning when she falls into Chocolat's arms,
Yeah.
it's like very early on, and it's peppered throughout. And then you're like, oh yeah, she's really dying.
Yeah.
That's pretty, but it is so funny. I mean, the spectacular moment is just so delightful. And I love the way it's edited too, and like the fast forward moments, and the sound effects, and I love, again, in the beginning, it really gets you into it. You're either in or you're out with the whole Sound of Music situation, and they're doing the whole play. That moment, and then once you get into the Moulin Rouge, like you're either in and you're out. So you're either completely on board or you're like, I don't know if this is for me.
Yeah, it's not one of those musicals that it's like slowly gets you in over like 45 minutes, and like within 20 minutes you have a feel for what this movie is going to be. And if it's not landing with you, it's not going to be your
Exactly.
a movie.
It's not going to be your
you.
cup of tea.
But I mean, just the opening is so beautiful. Like before we get the 20th Century Fox, we get like a little conductor guy. I mean, that was really innovative and original. You don't see that very often.
And with the curtain opening, I think the epicness of it, that's the other thing that drew me to the movie, is that it just feels so epic and huge with all those little touches. And then even the closing credits and the way that those are designed, I think Silvana designed those, and they're beautiful with all of the illustrations, and then that bolero song playing. It's just every little piece of the movie is thought about, and there was no stone unturned. It was
what I love about Baz Luhrmann's work is that he never rushes, right? Like he really takes his time. I mean, I want to say, I mean, has he made a film like less than 5 years like after the next one? Usually it's a long stretch of time before his next film. Well, did he have a film, I forgot to look, between Moulin Rouge and Australia? I feel like Australia was the next one, right?
Yes,
7 years later.
That was the next one. They had done the La Boheme on Broadway. That was a big project they had done in between those two, I believe. And then then did Australia, and then Gatsby after that. And then they just finished shooting Elvis.
That's right, with Tom Hanks, right?
Yes.
Which I believe that was the film Tom Hanks was getting ready to shoot, right?
Yeah,
or had they started shooting when he got COVID?
Away. It was a day away.
The next day?
Yeah, the next day they were supposed to start filming. Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty crazy. Yeah.
So they came back in the fall of 2020 to actually shoot it?
Yeah, they just wrapped about a month ago. Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. So interesting. I'm so excited. We're getting a new Luhrmann film. So that'll
know,
probably be 2022, right? Probably 22.
Probably. I've seen a bunch of, last time I was over at their house, like there's so much fun stuff going on. So I can't wait for people to see it, just hearing the little bits and bobs from everybody. It sounds super exciting.
Yeah. Directors I love who don't make a lot of films, it's always really exciting when you get a new one coming. I imagine it was hard for Stanley Kubrick fans in the late part of the 20th century.
To wait.
It's been 12 years. Anything else?
Stanley.
Yeah. Now that was the guy who took his time.
Yes, he sure did. In the pandemic, I started a costume blog writing about all movies that have won the best costume Oscar. I only got 4 in, and then I went back to work, but I want to keep doing it. But I did do Barry Lyndon, and I did a whole extensive thing about, because those costumes are insane. I mean, they're incredible, and very specifically uber realistic to the period, which is not usually what happens in costume design. So it was fun to write about all of that and how exacting Kubrick was about it all.
Would that be fun for you to take on a project like that, a project set hundreds of years ago and coming up with the costumes, or would that be almost like too much to handle?
I would love that. I'm really itching to do a period film. Like something I really want to do is a mid-century movie musical. Like, just that's what I really want to do more than anything right now. I mean, I love making horror. It's like one of my favorite things. But I love making a horror movie and then doing something different, and then a horror movie. It's like nice to balance out, the different things that I do. But would love to do like a 1960s movie musical. Would make me so happy.
So at this stage in your career, are you pursuing a lot of these jobs, or people coming to you? Is it kind of like a mix of both at this point?
Kind of a mix. I go after sort of specific things that I want, and then I will do any movie that Chris Landon's doing, because he's my favorite person in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm like, Chris, you're doing great. I'm going to come follow you with that. And then, it's a mixture otherwise. And I love working with people I've worked with before. Just really fun to have good vibes. I'm a person who really likes working with good, kind people. I definitely have a no assholes policy too. It's like I want to have a good time. I want to work hard, but my whole MO is like, let's have fun. This is a crazy world and job that we live in. We work crazy long hours. Like, let's have a good time.
How many people are on your costume design team? Like on a movie like Freaky, like how many people are working with you in the costume department?
It's around like 7 to
Seven?
10, depending on like what's happening, if we have background, costumers or this or that. But it's usually like my costume supervisor, my assistant designer. I have a tailor. I have like 3 costumers usually. So yeah, about 7, a shopper, depending on how big or small the project was. I just had 7 on my last job. So
Okay, interesting. And so every day, do you have to work with these people really closely, and
Mhm.
they're coming to you with questions, and you have to come up with an answer even if you don't have one?
Yes, exactly. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
let's circle back to that. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we're all a very, intricate team. We're all very much working together, and I would be nothing without my team. I mean, I'm the costume designer, but if I don't have a team to support me, I mean, I can't get anything done. So my team is really what makes a project happen. So I'm always so grateful for them. Like my team on the paranormal movie I just finished, they're the best people ever. So I got very lucky to have such an amazing team.
That's fantastic. How many people do you think worked on costumes for Moulin Rouge? I'd one like
A lot. I
more
think
than 7, right?
about 60 probably. I'm
60?
probably 60 to 100. I remember on Gatsby we had somewhere around 60, I believe,
Wow.
working on it. It was pretty intense. It was a lot. Like my technical title was costume design assistant, but I was like sort of the second assistant costume designer slash catch-all, kind of doing design stuff. It was sort of there's no rhyme or do this job, very, very fun. I'm like, yes, I got it.
That's so fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's see, anything else about Moulin Rouge we haven't covered? Are there any specific costume designs in the film that really stand out to you? Like maybe for Nicole Kidman, or what are some designs in the film you think are really outstanding?
For me, I mean, every single one of Nicole Kidman's dresses feels very iconic to me, especially like the sparkling diamond, the black and silver outfit she like comes down on the swing on. It's just so that is what I think about when I think of Moulin Rouge, that and the red ball gown that she wears for Elephant Love Medley. And then just all of the can dancers and Ziedler and that whole Moulin Rouge world is just such a creative space. Every single dancer has their own personality, and each, there's the one that's sort of half woman, half man. There's the one that's a little Bo Peep. There's so many different, and they all feel very specific and well thought out. And I remember I got to dig through the Moulin Rouge archives because I got to
Oh, nice.
I got to do a little co-design with CM on a Moulin Rouge themed event, and I got to go back and like look through a bunch of renderings, and just seeing all of the efforts that were put into all that was so fun to see.
Oh, that's so fantastic. I wonder, like, going through those archives, that
Yes.
must have been really trippy that you even have access to something like that.
I know, I couldn't believe, it's pretty, because I pride myself in being a professional, but then there's that 16-year-old part of me that's like, oh my gosh, this is what a dream. Here I was when I was 16, buying the press packet on eBay, in 2001, and now I get to like just have a look at the behind the scenes of the movie I love so much. And it's so funny watching the movie now is a very different experience because I know Baz and Catherine well now, and so it's just thinking about how they filmed that scene or how they put that together. It's a very different experience. Also, as an adult person now looking back on the movie, it's like I still have that nostalgia and the feelings that I had when I was 16, but it's now very different as an adult person who's also a costume designer, and I just see the movie differently.
I feel like if anyone ever were to write a tell-all book of this movie, you might be the right one to do.
I know. It's like I know certain things. I know a lot about the movie.
You're like, I don't need to do any research. I can just start.
I know all the things. I could do the entire movie by heart.
Yeah. Is there, so you watched it 300 times, is there anything you don't like about Moulin Rouge, or is it just a perfect film to you? Is there any criticism, any flaws?
I think for me, it's hard to find one. I mean, again, that's the 16-year-old in me talking.
Yeah.
It's like I just don't, and if there are, I just don't refuse to see them.
Hey, my favorite film at 16 was American Beauty, which
Oh
is
wow.
which is a film that today it's like almost hard to talk about.
It is. It's such a, but at the time, American Beauty was the it movie.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it was the thing. And it's so funny looking back on that movie now and how differently it hits and how differently it lands.
Yeah.
And I feel like Moulin Rouge, it feels very much like it did then when it came out. It's aged extremely well.
Yeah, it's like a timeless film. The period, it's set in 1900, and it feels like this fairy tale, as you say, and it doesn't really feel like, oh, this is clearly a 2001 film.
Right.
You watch
don't
it
see that at
now,
all.
it could have been 95, it could have been 2010. I mean, there's not really, I mean, except for maybe just the actors in the film and how they've aged or whatever.
And
that's
their
about
ages. But that's the only thing that really ages the movie. It is such a timeless movie. It could have come out at any time. And I think they really nailed that, because you look at some period movies like the 1970s Great Gatsby, you could totally tell that movie was made in the 70s.
Yes, the one with Redford and Mia Farrow.
Yes. I mean, the costume designs are brilliant. Like Theoni Aldrich made an amazing job, but it definitely looks heavily influenced by the 70s. And our Gatsby too, I feel like very much you can see the influences of early 2010s in that as well. But there's something about Moulin Rouge that feels completely timeless.
Some people have criticized it for the fast editing. Is that something that ever bothers you in the film or no?
I love it. I think the only thing, I guess my only quibble would be I would like to see some of those costumes more than the split second, some of those can dancers. I'm like, oh, I want to see more of that. I want to see maybe the dance numbers a little bit further out, but I think you would lose some of that frenetic energy that makes the movie so good.
Yeah, I don't think it works as well if we have a lot of long takes of the camera roaming around, and I think you need that fast cutting. It has that kind of early 2000s MTV kind of feel to it.
Yes,
that makes it so special. It's like if it was too many like long takes, it wouldn't have the energy that it does. So I need
that energy to make it like feel like what it meant to be in the Moulin Rouge at that time. Like, what did that feel like? Much like in Gatsby, we wanted to make it feel like what it felt like in the 20s to be in that, dancing with everybody. So we did some modern influences on the clothes just so a modern audience of 2013 could see that movie and know what it felt like to be at those parties in the 20s. Because if you go for strict period accuracy, it's not going to feel right, because we have a modern sensibility. We're not stuck in the 20s of the 1920s. And so you have to sort of alter it to a place where the audience watching it will understand what it felt like.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's some other actors we haven't touched on. I love Jim Broadbent in this movie. I believe he won the Oscar that year for Best Supporting Actor for Iris.
Yes,
and I believe, doesn't he end his speech with "Go Moulin Rouge"?
Yes, exactly.
Moulin Rouge, that was a weird year in that it was up for Best Picture. It was not up for Best Director.
No.
And a lot of people blamed Baz Luhrmann's omission because of David Lynch, who was nominated, the only nomination at the Academy Awards that year for Mulholland Drive, which was my other favorite film of the year. So I'm like,
you're like, it's so hard to...
So, but there was buzz. There was totally buzz that Moulin Rouge could win Best Picture. Like, I'm sure that night you were really like,
yeah, I was like, come on.
So it won two. It won art direction and costume design.
Yes.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, both for Catherine.
She won two that night.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then let's see, Nicole Kidman was nominated for Best Actress. She lost to Halle Berry for Monsters Ball, which was like a big deal.
That was a big Oscars moment in Oscars history for sure.
Now here's a question for you. So Nicole Kidman lost Best Actress that night, but then she won the year after this for The Hours. If Nicole Kidman had won for Moulin Rouge, would she have won for The Hours? Probably not. It probably would have gone to Renee Zellweger for Chicago, who was very, very close.
So
I think we
and
were like
so
neck and
good.
neck.
And it's so interesting how all those little decisions, and I wish that we could see like the point margins and how close these like races really were,
Yeah.
because I think it would be fascinating. And like, yeah, if Nicole won for Moulin Rouge, and then the domino effect, and I'm sure that every best actress from then on out would actually be mostly different. It's just interesting how all these, one decisions, it's not in a vacuum. It really affects everything else.
Yeah, I always think about the year that Kate Winslet won for The Reader, and I just thought Meryl Streep was so astonishing in Doubt, and she had not won for 25 years or whatever it had been. And I bet it was close, but Kate Winslet had been nominated so many times, and she's so great that year in both The Reader and Revolutionary Road that it made sense for her to win. But then if Meryl Streep had won that night, Viola Davis probably would have won for The Help instead of Meryl Streep. But so it's so interesting, that domino effect.
Exactly. And them getting Oscars, I don't think people wanted Meryl to win for The Iron Lady, and it's like, we want her to have an Oscar, but maybe for this other role. And it's interesting because I thought also Nicole could have been nominated for the others that year too. In addition to Moulin Rouge, I feel like there was probably a split vote happening there where people like, oh, she's brilliant in that movie, absolutely brilliant. And so I can see that might have pulled some votes away from Moulin Rouge as well, like when it was,
Yeah, sometimes it's tricky. Sometimes when an actor has two really great performances in a year, it's like you can't nominate both in the acting categories. You can do lead actress and supporting actress. Like the year that Jamie Foxx won lead actor for Ray, he was nominated for supporting actor for Collateral, a movie that he's in every scene of.
Right, exactly.
I'm like, okay.
You're like, how does this work? Okay.
But yeah, speaking of that domino effect, real quick, just this most recent Oscar ceremony we had, I did not think Frances McDormand could win because she just won for three billboards
just
in 2017.
Ago.
That was my rationale. I said they're not going to give it to her. She won for Fargo in the 90s.
Right.
She won for 3 billboards. They're not going to give her a third one.
I know, it's just so interesting that you can never guess what's actually going to happen, like brilliant performances all the way around, but then you're like, oh, that was very surprising. I did not think that was going to happen.
And if I'm not mistaken, Ewan McGregor has never been nominated for an Oscar.
Never been. No.
What's the hate for Ewan McGregor?
It's very upsetting. I demand a recount.
He's fantastic. I mean, he was great in Doctor Sleep just a couple years ago. He's so great. And he's one of those actors just consistently really great in movie after movie, and you're really like, how has he never been nominated?
Like, this doesn't make any sense, and he luckily, got attention for Fargo, rightly so. He was so brilliant in that. But it's just very odd to me. He's just consistently putting in such amazing work, and then just for whatever reason not getting recognized, which is a bummer. I'm very excited to see Halston. I had so many friends who worked on that, so I cannot wait to see it. One of my best friends was actually sort of the vintage consultant and helped him like flick fabric properly across the table and doing all that kind of stuff, which was fun. I mean, she was a tailor on the project, but she also helped. And I met Ewan a few years ago. He was on Broadway in The Real Thing, and one of my dear friends from high school, now still one of my close friends, was in the show with him. And so I got to go backstage, and I actually got to meet Ewan, and was like, hey, I know Baz and CM, and we had like the loveliest conversation, and he's super nice guy. But it was, just so funny to like, I love your movies.
You're like, hi, Ewan. I've seen Moulin Rouge a few hundred times.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that.
That's not a great first impression to say to someone. I've seen your movie 300 times.
No, that's stalker behavior.
That's where it gets a stalker level.
Right. It's like,
have you had a chance to meet Nicole Kidman ever?
No, never. Hopefully one day.
Maybe. Would that be crazy one day if you're a costume designer on a Nicole Kidman movie or a
TV
that would
series?
Be the best.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And I think that's my hope, is like, if I meet anybody involved in the movie, or I would want it to be in a professional setting. It's like, I would love to work with these people as a costume designer to their actor, or, any other position, because we all love making movies and we get to share that commonality, which is super cool.
Because Kidman works all the time. I mean, I want to say
all the time.
When 6 months have gone by and there's been no new Kidman project, I'm like, why is she slacking off? What's going on?
What is she like? What's happening? Why is she not?
Was it 2017 at the Cannes Film Festival? She had 4 movies.
4 movies.
I'm
You're like,
like,
Nicole,
make it
workhorse.
5.
Yeah.
Why?
Get
What are
your
you doing?
second.
Make it 5.
We need one more.
Like, does she see her husband ever? Like, she's just on one set to another. I mean, you have a little break, right? Right now, you have a
Yeah,
little
I
window
have
of time.
what 13 days
13
between.
days. I think Kidman has like half a day, right?
Exactly. And it's easier, I think, for actors to hop, I'm on a movie for like 3 to 4 months
Mhm.
at minimum. And like they can go do a week here and a week there. And it's a lot easier to sort of piece all those different films together. Whereas like I can do max 3 movies a year. And that's if I'm pushing it. Usually it's like 2 and then I get a break.
Yeah. And then you have like a director who is usually on a film for 2+ years, right?
Yeah.
Directors, occasionally you'd see a director have like 2 films in the same year. I'll never really understand how Steven Spielberg had Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year.
No. Like, how on earth? How did you do that? Like, totally crazy. I mean, but Chris Landon, he works so hard. He's got 6 different projects basically happening right now in different capacities, and it's pretty amazing to watch all of that happen. But yeah, it's a lot. And then it takes a while for a movie to come out. I filmed a movie 2 years ago called India Sweets and Spices, which is premiering at Tribeca next month. And cool. It's just like we filmed it 2 years ago, and I'm like so excited to finally see our work. That but that's how long movies take to happen.
Yeah. So I worked on the movie Area 51 with Oren Peli in 2009, and it came out in 2015.
Right. Right.
Like I was in a whole new life. I was a teacher, a professor, and I'm like, oh, it's premiering this weekend. Okay.
It's happening. Oh.
6 years.
And like, Gatsby, I started in 2010 and it came out, May 2013. So, that was a bit of a chunk too when I started. So yeah,
when you spend that much time on a project, I mean, obviously you just hope for it to be good. Right? Like hope it turns out to be okay.
It's like you hope so. And you put everything into it. We put so much in everything that we do, and but then it's over and you're like, well, I hope in a year or 2 years from now it's what we thought it was when we made it. But it's always super exciting, and you feel kind of this distance in a way that's great, that you get to experience your work in a different way. It's not just happened, so you don't have like the trauma of the long hours or the overnights or the elements. You get to see it fresh, which is really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything else about Moulin Rouge? We haven't even talked about Come What May, which is such a gorgeous song.
The most
and I
song.
assumed going on IMDb, I'm like, oh, well, that was nominated for Best Song, right? Because that's like the one original song. It was written for Romeo and Juliet, so they couldn't nominate it.
Which is like, it would have won all the awards if it had been allowed to be in it.
Like, I was like, that probably won for 2001. Right. It wasn't even nominated. And then I had to look, it's because it was written for a different film.
Yeah, which is that. I mean, that song is just so glorious. And I mean, how do I pick a favorite song? They're all my favorite songs. They're all so great. But I think it really spoke to me again as like this tomboy teenager who had like never had a first kiss, never had, was playing basketball at lunch with my best friend, but very happy in that life. And then it was such a world that was so different from mine. I was that teenager who like longed for love and all of that. And it really spoke to that person that I was.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful scene. I mean, I want to say they sing that song more than once in the movie, right? Is it like
it comes back.
It comes back.
It gets reprised at the very end, like when they make up on the stage, and she's like, I'm not gonna go be with the Duke, but things come up May, and that's what it means. And so that's that part. That's actually the part I probably rewatched the most. I watched the whole movie 300 times, but when I would go back and rewatch it, it would be that ending bit when she's like reaching out to him by singing Come What May, and then he's, and then the whole scramble with the gun and the, that whole big
sequence is so well done. I mean, you always know what's happening in any given moment, but you have like a show within a show, and you've got 800 people or whatever it is in that room. I mean, it feels like it's 800 people, and you're like, how do you shoot this scene, let alone edit it all together in a way that makes sense? But it does.
And make it feel like it makes sense. But every frame and every moment, you're like, okay, that's where the gun is. That's what's happening over there. This is happening. It just shows how chaotic that whole moment is, which makes it even more special when, it sort of unfolds.
Yeah, and her death scene, I mean, she's a powerhouse throughout the whole movie, but the last 20 minutes, I think Nicole Kidman is just so phenomenal in this. And she sells that death scene. So sometimes it's
So
cheesy in a
much.
movie when someone's
Right.
dying and you're like, they're like, their eyes are slowly closing and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And this
Yeah.
one works. Like you can feel the life draining
Yes.
out of her. And part of that is
Yeah.
also Ewan McGregor sobbing.
Yes.
Like he can't contain himself in that
Oh,
moment. And it's
the
so
two of
heartbreaking.
them, and they have such great chemistry. And yeah, both of them in that moment just so nail that mood. I mean, no wonder everyone just is sobbing at the end of that movie.
And then at the very end, you get the conductor again, kind of returns with the curtains, and you get that remembrance, that fading into. I mean, it's just such a beautiful ending.
It is.
You know,
it is such a chills. Chills.
Yeah.
I finally got to see the movie on the big screen 2 years ago. I'd never seen it in a theater. And so there was like a random screening of it in Chelsea last year. And I was like, well, I got it. So I took myself to the movies and got to sit and watch my favorite movie for the first time in a movie theater. And I just had all those feels again. I got, it's like the first time I cried to the movie in quite a while because it just felt so enveloping. And I've seen it so many times, it's hard to elicit a lot of emotion out of me anymore. But that certainly did it.
Are you able to just speak every line of dialogue throughout the whole movie?
Basically, yeah. Yeah.
That's like me with the movie Dumb and Dumber. Like I know it's hard to laugh at it these days because I know it so well. I know every line. It's like, how do you really laugh at it anymore? It's so familiar.
Right, because you've seen it so many times. But I think the fact that we keep returning back and watching it, there's something that always draws us back, and it's just that special quality.
So the film is turning 20 years old today. What do you think that means for this movie? Like, how is this movie? I mean, as you said before, it hasn't really aged like some other films from like 2001. This movie has a timeless quality. But does it feel weird that it's turning 20 years old? What does that feel like to you?
It's a bit bizarre too, because I'm, a completely different person than I was when I first saw it, 16-year-old me, and now almost 36-year-old me. Very different. So much has happened in my life, and I've met so many people who worked on this movie, and now watching it is, it's a very different experience. But it's just a little shocking that 20 years has gone by. What feels like not that much time.
It doesn't feel like it's been 20 years.
No, but yet I think that's why anniversaries and these remembrances are so interesting, because you're like, how has it been that long?
Yeah.
There's no way. What about you? Like, how do you feel after, did you see it in the theater when it first came out?
Yeah, it was either opening night or the second night. Like I was really into film by 2001. So anything outside the box, I was really interested in. And I had seen Romeo and Juliet, which I thought was great. And I was already in 2001, huge fan of both McGregor and Kidman. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I remember I brought 2 or 3 of my guy friends, and they're sitting there going, what is this? And I knew, as you say, in the early part of the movie, you kind of are with it or you're against it. And I knew very early on, once they started singing, Sound of Music.
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, I had seen Sound of Music. I'm like, oh, they're using songs from other sources. And
like, this is interesting.
Taking these, like, just these beautiful songs, and just the look of the film was so astonishing from the first minute. And I recognize once like Nicole Kidman comes down in that first scene, I was like, okay, this is something really special. Yeah. And my guy friends were not into it. They were like,
absolutely not.
When does Jurassic Park 3 come out?
Yeah.
That was their question. And I'm like, no. And so I went back. I saw it 2 or 3 weeks later with my mom. I was like, Mom, you got to see this. And so I saw it a second time with her, and I got the DVD right when it came out. And, I was not out of the closet yet in 2001, but I was really into musicals, and I would voice my love of musicals to everyone at school and stuff. And so I was still figuring myself out in 2001 in high school. But I mean, this was one of those early films where I could recognize, there was something in my DNA that really responded to this movie, and this beautiful love story. And I could kind of understand even then why my guy friends were not going for it as much as I was at the time.
Okay, like, what's the disconnect here? Like, what?
Why did they not like it? Why are they?
Just sort of this interesting world of where everyone is welcome and every type of person is celebrated.
Mm-hmm. John Leguizamo and his character, he's welcomed into this community, this space that, outside of it, maybe not so much. So maybe that played a part in it. Yeah.
And I that's what I love about it. It's like, here's a place where it doesn't matter who you are or what you want, like, you're welcome to this, crazy place. And and I think that was really special too, having maybe a crazy debaucherous nightclub, but it's still a space that welcomes all sorts of people.
Yeah. It's such a blast of a movie. As I said before we started recording, I don't really see people talk about it that much online anymore. Doesn't have like a lot of memes or anything, like I don't really see it come up. I'm hoping these next few weeks we'll see some more talk about it for its 20th anniversary.
Very confusing that it's just not as big. It's not as big in the popular culture as I think it, especially with this resurgence of the movie musical. Just feel like it was such a huge step to get to where we are with musicals now. I mean, people credit Chicago, but Moulin Rouge was doing it first. I mean, also doing it in a way that was very non-traditional in terms of musicals. It was doing something fresh and new that we had never seen before, because everyone knows Oklahoma and all of the how big that kind of movie musical was, or like Oklahoma was the first time to really have songs that forwarded the plot, and so that was a huge moment in like musical history. And then Moulin Rouge was taking these existing songs and then putting it together in this huge way that we'd never seen before. And then I don't think the world was quite ready for that yet. Ready for that, and so it sort of didn't do as big of a hit as I think it would now. I think if it came out now, people would go insane for it,
Yeah, you make a good point. This was the first live action feature film musical in a while, right? I want to say in the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
You would get some in Disney animated films, but really this film kicked off the long stretch of great musicals we would get, like Chicago the following year. We would get Hairspray a few years after that, and Rent the film in 2005. And I feel like this started a trend of bringing the musical back. And then right now we have In the Heights and West Side Story coming out later in 2021. In the Heights is coming just in a few days. Like it's coming very soon.
Yeah.
And I can't wait. I've wanted to see it for more than a year since they announced it and that it was coming out. And
it looks amazing.
Obviously a huge Steven Spielberg fan, and he has always wanted to make a musical his entire career as a director, and he finally made one in West Side Story coming out in December. So the musicals are here to stay.
Which I'm very happy about, because I'm like, will someone let me make one? Because I want to so badly. They're just so fun. I mean, I grew up such a theater person. I mean, I have like 100 musical albums on my computer. I just love musicals and they make me so happy. So I hope that this trend just continues and it's just part of what our world is now. We just have movie musicals again, like we did in the 40s and 50s, and we just continue it. Keep it going.
So if somebody comes to you in another 20 years and says, we're remaking Moulin Rouge, will you be our costume designer? What do you say?
I mean, there's no way I would say no. I would have to get CM and Baz's blessing. That would be the only thing. They would have to be okay with it.
Yeah. We could get Nicole and Ewan back. They would just play
you're
older.
Like, come on, we're just retelling the story.
Yeah. No, I feel like this is a property that they'll never remake. I would be kind of surprised. There is a film, I want to say in the 1950s called Moulin Rouge, but it's not, I believe the 01 film is not the same.
Yeah, it's its own thing. It's, about Toulouse-Lautrec, and it's like about the Moulin Rouge that actually existed, but it's very much its own separate story.
Yeah. So I love this movie. I know you love this movie.
Yes.
It's been such a blast to talk to you about it. I wanted to end our conversation talking about the career of Nicole Kidman. On most of my podcast episodes, we end with a segment called Beyond the Flick, where we pick an actor or a director involved with the movie. And Nicole Kidman, looking at her filmography last night, I mean, it's as you said, it's hard to pick three.
Yeah, how do you pick?
I mean, and she's done such great work on television lately too, with her limited series. I just watched The Undoing a few months ago and was so great on HBO.
Yeah.
So outside of Moulin Rouge, you had to pick 2 or 3 other movies or limited series she's in that you think are great. What would they be?
I was thinking about this. It's very hard. I would have to say, because I'm such a horror person, The Others.
The Others.
I absolutely love her in The Others. She's so brilliant in that. My also childhood self has to say Practical Magic, because I absolutely love Practical Magic. It's so good. And then trying to pick like a third one, I was having just so many issues, and I don't know if I don't know, maybe To Die For.
I just
love that that performance, and it sort of shows you who Nicole was gonna become and her work ahead, you know.
Yeah, she had done some high profile movies up until 95, but I feel like for a few years she was known as Tom Cruise's wife, the wife of Cruise. And To Die For lack of a better word, killed
all of that. Yeah. It's like look,
we really saw what a great actress she could be. That same year, she's the love interest in Batman Forever,
Yeah.
And
exactly.
then, but by the end of 95, she has this real breakthrough performance in that. Not to say she hadn't had one before. One of my favorite Nicole Kidman movies is from 89. Have you seen Dead Calm?
Yeah,
with
so
Billy
good.
Zane and Sam Neill.
Such a good movie. I love that movie. She's fantastic in that.
1989's Dead Calm is what really put her on the map, and that's where I think U.S. audiences first really noticed her. And that's what got her cast in Days of Thunder, directed by Tony Scott and starring Tom Cruise, and that's the film that they met on and fell in love. They would go on to do another film I still have never seen called Far and Away.
Oh yeah, it's wild. it's real wild.
Yeah. So yeah, To Die For, really important film in her career. There was also an important film for Joaquin Phoenix. He had been in a few films as a kid, and then he wasn't in anything for, I want to say, 5 or 6 years, something like that, maybe even longer. And that was the movie that brought him back. Like he started up auditioning again.
Too. He's fantastic in that movie. Just such a solid cast in that one, and people who would go on to do, have such great careers.
When Joaquin Phoenix won the Screen Actors Guild Award for Joker, he said, like, so many roles he was going up for in the 90s, he would always lose the role to Leonardo DiCaprio. Right. Which I'm like, wait, did he audition for Titanic? I don't think he did.
Right, you're like,
that would have been Joaquin Phoenix as Jack Dawson.
You're like, I don't know if I see it.
Yeah. Now, Practical Magic, this is controversial. I don't really like that film very much, and Sandra Bullock is my favorite. Anybody. Of all
time, right?
I adore Sandra Bullock.
She's amazing.
My thing with that movie, I love them together. I want it to be a little bit more. I think I'm just looking for a more serious movie or something, because it kind of settles down into that plot of like her boyfriend and they have to revive him. It's a little kind of sitcom-y for me.
Rewatching it, I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know about this movie, but there was the kid who watched it so many times, and I was like,
it's kind of like a nostalgic film.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, well, that's not her best role. I mean, she's brilliant in The Hours. She's so good in that movie. I mean, which she won for. I love watching that movie. I love The Hours.
Yeah. So my favorites would be Moulin Rouge and The Hours. I mean, she doesn't have a lot of screen time considering she won lead actress. I mean, she's in it, like 25 minutes or 30 minutes?
Yeah, that's about it. You're like, okay. I mean, she's brilliant in it.
But what a cast in The Hours. I mean, I watched it again 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm like, wow, it's not just Nicole Kidman and Meryl Streep and Julianne Moore, but you have Ed Harris, who got an Oscar nomination. He's so great in it. I believe Julianne Moore was nominated too. Yes. That movie got nominated for like everything.
Yeah, sure did.
But you also have Allison Janney, and Jeff Daniels is great in a small role in the movie, and Toni Collette. I mean, you have just like so many great people. And it's great writing, beautiful photography. I love The Hours. It's very depressing. Yeah, it's not a movie to watch over and over.
No, you watch it and you're like, "Ooh, that was a really well done movie," and I'm gonna sit with that feeling for a minute and then maybe not return.
The Hours 300 times might be a bit much.
A little bit much.
And I love her other films she was nominated for, like Lion and Rabbit Hole. I feel like Rabbit Hole from 2010 nobody ever talks about, but she is great in that film.
Fantastic. And I love Lion. I love Rabbit Hole. I also love Boy Erased that came out a few years ago. I think also she's great so film. Good in that. She's wonderful in that film. That film didn't get as much notice as I think,
Yeah, she just keeps turning in all these great performances, like Destroyer, where she has a totally different look in that. It's a very gritty indie film. It's not a movie I loved by any means, but her performance in it is like insane. And then I love what she's done for HBO. Both seasons of Big Little Lies, I think, are great. I mean, I think her performance in season 1 of Big Little Lies is like the clear standout. I just think she is incredible in that. Not to say, I mean, Laura Dern is also great in that show too.
I mean, that whole cast, again, another stacked cast.
Meryl Streep, like playing a supporting role in an HBO series. I'm like, wow. Yeah. I mean, okay, they got Meryl for this. Okay. And then The Undoing with Hugh Grant was also just fantastic. So she keeps turning in great work. But my favorite film of hers we have not mentioned. Can you guess what my favorite might be?
Ooh.
I have named the director already in this podcast.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Her whole filmography, I'm like, there's a lot of contenders here.
Yeah. And now I'd like to pick something like To Die For, something where she's the star of. But for me, the best film she's in is Eyes Wide Shut. I think that is a great movie.
How could I not?
And
she's so brilliant in that.
And I thought she was deserving of a Best Supporting Actress nomination for that film. I just think she is. I mean, Tom Cruise is really solid in it, but she is just on another level in that movie. Right?
And also what they were dealing with filming that movie and how long it took over a year to film and just what they went through. And then living in London, they built sets in London to look like New York. It's just it was totally insane. That production filming, it sounded crazy. And to give that performance with all of that going on must have been that's so impressive.
I actually think she filmed Practical Magic when she was like on a break from Eyes Wide Shut, if I remember right. Like she had like a few months of a window.
Right?
Like, okay, I'll go do this.
I'll go do this movie and I'll come back to this.
Because I don't think Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise were used to that, like filming a movie for more than a year. Tom Cruise is like, I'm a major star. I need to make some other films.
Get off this contract.
He shoots that film for over a year, and then he shoots, I believe, Magnolia in a week. I think he shot his whole role in like a week. So that movie went from one extreme to the other.
And that movie's another like sort of iconic film too. Mm-hmm. Very different characters.
We were both like in our teens around 99, 2000, 2001, and so many great films around that time. I mean, just the year of 1999 is considered by many like the greatest year of a film, at least in the modern days.
Exactly. Like everything that's come out in 1999, it was just so many huge directors now were like making their first features or first couple, and it was just such a powerful time. I mean, all of those movies are just sort of iconic now, or at least so talked about. It was quite, and like one of my favorite movies as a kid was Matrix. I watched that as a teenager all the time, and like those costumes done by Kim Barrett, who is the costume designer of Romeo and Juliet. So there's a connection there too. So it's just a lot of brilliant work happening in that time.
Yeah, 1999, so great. That's the year of Eyes Wide Shut. And I mean, she got to work with Stanley Kubrick on his last movie. I believe he delivered the film 4 days before he died.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. Yeah. That was the last project. 12 years after his last film, Full Metal Jacket. And and I feel like a lot of people think it's lesser Kubrick. It's not as good as his landmark films. And I love Eyes Wide Shut. It's so creepy and weird. And you have at that time a real married couple in the lead roles, and they're fighting. And it's just kind of an interesting voyeuristic film and so beautifully done. And she gets the iconic last word of a Stanley Kubrick film, which I will not repeat.
I know, right? Well, like that's pretty iconic right there.
I mean, if that's the only thing Nicole Kidman had ever done.
Right.
But then right after this, she's in Moulin Rouge, and it's just one of the great films of 2001. One of our favorite films. Your favorite film?
My favorite film.
This was so much fun, Whitney.
So much fun. Thank you for having me.
Like, this has been an absolute blast. One of my favorite bonus episodes I have done for the podcast in this last year. So much fun. And so, I just wanted to end by saying thank you. And if you have anything you'd like to promote, or anywhere our listeners can find you online, like maybe your website, or talk about anywhere our listeners can find you.
I'm on all the socials. I'm on my website, whitneyadams.com. We'll direct you to all of them. But I'm on Instagram. That's my main place, my main hangout, WAA Costume Design. And then I have, look in the future for Paranormal 7, which will be titled something different. Look for that. And then I have a movie called 3 Months coming out hopefully this year or next year with Troye Sivan. It's a really great coming of age story. And then I have another movie, India Sweets and Spices, which is coming out next month with Tribeca. And then I have, Happy Death Day to You, Freaky, all available on all the places.
Well, thanks for taking time out of your busy life, your busy career to talk to me today. It was
Moulin such Rouge. A pleasure. So fun. I will always talk about Moulin Rouge.
So excited to get to connect with you, and I'm thrilled to see what happens next in your career. I mean, so many big things are happening. I'm really excited to follow these next years to see what you do. I'll be there. I'll be watching all of these films that you work on. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
So thanks for being here. And thanks to all of you for listening. We will catch you next time on Film at 50.